I remember the day I died, not the death that would eventually claim me in service to the Emperor, but the death of the child I once was. The day the sky split open and a pod of burning metal descended upon the volcanic plains of Nocturne. The day they found me, a scrawny thing with burns across half my body, clutching a hammer I had forged myself from scraps. The day I became something more than human. They say the first death is the easiest. I have died 1,000 times since, each brother lost, each civilian I could not save, each world left burning in our wake. Small deaths, necessary deaths. The currency with which we purchase what the Imperium calls glory. My name is Sergeant Tarek of the Salamanders' 3rd Company, and I have served the Emperor for 276 Terran years. I have walked through fire that would melt flesh from bone. I have faced horrors that would shatter the minds of mortal men. I have seen the best and worst of humanity, often in the same moment, in the same person. I have been called hero, monster, savior, and butcher. The truth, as always, burns somewhere in between. The first thing they teach you when you join the Salamanders is that fire does not just destroy. Fire purifies, fire forges. The weak metal becomes strong in the flames. The impurities burn away. What remains is harder, more resilient, more useful. But make no mistake, becoming useful is a violent process. My transformation began in the burning halls of Mount Deathfire. I was 12 Terran years old, though on Nocturne, with its harsh and unforgiving cycle of destruction and rebirth, such measurements meant little. I had survived my trial, recovered an artifact from deep within one of the volcanic fissures that constantly threatened to consume our settlements. My lungs were scorched, my skin was blistered, but I had proven myself worthy of consideration. The apothecaries took me apart piece by piece. They replaced my fragile human organs with manufactured marvels of biological engineering. They reshaped my skeleton, lengthened my limbs, expanded my ribcage to accommodate my enhanced physiology. They rewrote the code of my existence at the genetic level with the sacred gene seed of Vulcan himself. I screamed for days, then weeks, then months, until one morning I realized I had forgotten how to scream. I had forgotten the boy I once was. I looked in the reflecting surface of a surgical instrument and saw red eyes staring back at me from coal-black skin. I was reborn in fire. I was no longer human. I was Astartes. I was a salamander. The humans we protect look upon us with awe, with reverence, with fear. They do not understand what we have sacrificed to become their guardians. They see only the glory. They do not see the cost. But I am getting ahead of myself. The story of any space marine is the story of war. Endless war. War without purpose beyond survival. War without hope of victory. War without meaning except that which we carve from it with bolter and blade. But for the sons of Vulcan, war has always meant something different, something more. For us, there is no glory in battle itself. Glory lies only in the salvation of those who cannot save themselves. My first deployment came 63 years ago on a mining world called Corrigus VII, a backwater planet of little strategic importance but home to 8 billion Imperial citizens. The kind of place the Imperium remembers only when the tithe comes due or when something goes catastrophically wrong. Something had gone catastrophically wrong. The Vox distress signal spoke of rebellion, but what we found was worse, much worse. Genstealers had infiltrated the primary mining colony 3 generations earlier. By the time we arrived, half the planet's ruling class bore the subtle marks of Xenos corruption. Slightly too many joints in their fingers, eyes that reflected light like polished stone, mouths that opened just a fraction wider than they should. I remember standing in the drop pod as it plummeted toward the surface, surrounded by my battle brothers. The veterans wore the resigned expression of men who knew what was coming. The younger ones, like myself, still believed in glory, in heroism, in salvation. Captain Dracus, a warrior with 300 years of service etched into the scars on his face, looked at me with something like pity. "Remember, Brother Tarek," he said, his voice as rough as volcanic stone. "We are the Salamanders. We bring the Emperor's mercy as well as his judgment. Save those who can be saved." I nodded, full of purpose, full of pride. I did not understand the weight of his words. Not yet. We made planetfall in the capital mining settlement, a sprawling city built into the side of a mountain rich with adamantium ore. The streets were empty. The silence was absolute. 8 million people lived in that city, and not one walked its streets. "Where are they?" Brother Agathon asked, his bolter sweeping across the vacant plaza where we had landed. A sound answered him, a wet, slithering sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. From the sewer grates, from the darkened windows of hab blocks, from the mining tunnels that fed into the city like arteries. "They are here," Captain Dracus said, igniting his power sword. The blue energy field hummed to life, casting ghostly light across his grim features. "They are all around us." The first wave came from below. The adamantium grates in the streets burst upward as hundreds of bodies surged from the sewer systems. They had once been human, miners, administrators, children. Now they were twisted parodies of humanity, their limbs elongated, their skulls malformed, their skin stretched tight over bulging muscles that had never been intended for human frames. I remember raising my bolter. I remember the first round I fired, punching through the chest of what had once been a woman. She still wore the tattered remains of a mining administrator's uniform. A name tag was pinned to her chest, just above where my bolt round detonated, shredding her torso in an explosion of corrupted flesh. Her name had been Livia. I tell myself she was already dead, that the person she had been had died long before I pulled the trigger. But in the dreams that sometimes come during my brief periods of sleep, I see her face. I see all their faces. We fought for 18 hours straight in that first engagement. Bolter fire and flamers turned the narrow streets into killing corridors. The infected came in waves, using their superior numbers to try to overwhelm us. We burned them by the hundreds, by the thousands. The smell of promethium and cooked flesh filled the air, so thick you could taste it. I ran out of bolter ammunition 6 hours in. I switched to my combat knife and chainsword. The combat became intimate, personal. I looked into the eyes of each corrupted citizen as I ended their suffering. Some of them begged, some of them thanked me. By the time night fell, the streets ran black with tainted blood. We had secured a perimeter around the central administrative complex, but the city belonged to the gene stealers and their hybrid offspring. We were 18 salamanders against millions of infected. "We should call for exterminatus," Brother Hector said as we regrouped in what had once been a city council chamber. "The planet is lost." Captain Dracus shook his head. "There are 8 billion souls on this world, brother. Not all are infected. We do not condemn the innocent to death if there is any other way." "With respect, Captain," Hector persisted, "we have lost 3 battle brothers already. We cannot cleanse an entire planet with 15 Astartes." "We are salamanders," Dracus replied, and that was answer enough. That night, we discovered there were survivors. Humans who had barricaded themselves in the deep mining tunnels, protected by emergency blast doors designed to contain cave-ins. Nearly 2 million citizens, untainted, terrified, and running out of food and air. This is why we cannot simply burn the world and leave, Dracus told us as we gathered around the Vox unit that had picked up their desperate transmissions. This is what separates us from the other chapters. We remember what we fight for. We spent the next 8 days fighting our way to those mining tunnels, street by street, building by building. Every inch paid for in blood, most of it corrupted, but some of it pure. We lost 2 more brothers in those days. Good men. Warriors I had trained with, fought alongside, shared the sacred brotherhood of the Salamanders with. I remember Brother Caius most clearly. He had been a year behind me in training, a quiet soul with a gift for crafting. His artificer work on power armor was renowned throughout the chapter. He died holding a service tunnel against a wave of gene stealers so that 300 mining families could escape to our extraction point. When we recovered his body, we found that he had positioned himself in death to continue blocking the tunnel. Even in his final moments, he remembered his duty. We managed to evacuate 1,864,512 Imperial citizens from Corrigus VII. The rest were purged when the Inquisition finally arrived with a battle fleet and executed exterminators from orbit. The official record lists the operation as a success, a triumph of Imperial might. None of the official accounts mention the 6,135,488 souls who died in atomic fire. None mention the 5 Salamanders who gave their lives so that others might live. This is the glory they speak of in the great cathedrals of terror. This is the price of survival in a galaxy that knows only war. But Corrigus VII was only the beginning. The years blurred together after that first campaign, decades of war, centuries of battle. The names and faces of the worlds we fought on begin to run together like watercolors in the rain. But some stand out, some burn too brightly to ever fade from memory. Hephaestus Prime, a forge world of the Adeptus Mechanicus that fell to the corruption of chaos. We fought through manufactorums larger than cities, where the very machinery had been twisted into demonic parodies of themselves. The air was thick with toxic fumes and the screams of tortured machine spirits. In the great forges, where once they had produced tanks and weapons for the Emperor's armies, the corrupted tech priests conducted blasphemous rituals, binding demons to machines and flesh alike. We cleansed it with fire, always with fire. The sacred promethium of our flamers purified what could not be saved. We fought for 3 months on that world, 3 months of unrelenting horror. I watched a daemon engine consume Brother Terran, drawing him screaming into its mechanical maw while his armor crumpled like parchment. I avenged him. I slew the beast with melter charges placed in the exact spots where the machine and daemon were imperfectly joined. I listened to it scream as it died. I took no pleasure in the killing, only in the knowledge that it would claim no more victims. We evacuated 12,000 uncorrupted tech adepts from Hephaestus Prime. The rest were deemed too compromised to save. The Inquisition records note that we successfully preserved 37% of the Forge world's most valuable technological assets. They do not mention the cost. They never do. Then there was Valos 9, an agri-world on the edge of the Ultima Segmentum, a peaceful place of rolling fields and clear skies, the kind of world that reminds you what humanity is fighting to preserve. It was one of the few deployments where we arrived before disaster had fully taken hold. Orcs had made planetfall on the southern continent, a relatively small force, a splinter of a larger WARG that had been broken in the void by the Imperial Navy. Still, to the farmers and their families, it might as well have been the apocalypse. We deployed directly to the largest settlement under attack. I remember the golden fields burning, black smoke rising to stain the perfect blue sky. The sound of crude orc firearms mixed with the screams of civilians, the smell of blood and burning crops carried on a wind that should have borne only the scent of growing things. This time, we arrived in time to make a difference. The greenskins had only just breached the settlement's modest defenses when our drop pods crashed into their rear lines. We emerged in fire and fury, bolters roaring, flamers painting the fields with cleansing promethium. The orcs turned to face us, delighted by the prospect of a proper fight. Their war boss, a hulking beast, standing 3 heads taller than even a space marine, bellowed a challenge that shook the ground beneath our feet. For Vulcan and the Emperor. Captain Dracus roared in answer, and we charged. There is a purity to combat against orcs that one rarely finds in other theaters of war. They are not corrupted humans whom we must reluctantly destroy. They are not the pawns of chaos, to be pitied even as they are purged. They are not the insidious gene stealers or the enigmatic Eldar. Orcs are made for war. They desire nothing else. In a perverse way, they are the most honest enemy we face. The battle was glorious, in the simple sense that warriors sometimes use the word blade against blade, strength against strength, will against will, no moral ambiguity, no heartbreaking choices, just the clean calculus of combat. I faced the war boss myself, alongside Brother Piriel. The creature was immense, clad in crude armor cobbled together from scavenged tanks and downed aircraft. Its power claw could shear through ceramite as if it were cloth. Its roar was deafening, spittle flying from tusked jaws large enough to engulf a human head. Piriel struck first, his power axe biting deep into the orc's shoulder. Green blood sprayed across his armor. The beast hardly seemed to notice. It swung its claw in a vicious arc that Piriel was too slow to avoid completely. The claw caught him in the side, tearing through his armor and the flesh beneath. He went down, but not before emptying his bolt pistol into the warboss's chest. The rounds detonated against the creature's armor, staggering it just enough for me to attack. My chainsword roared as I drove it into the same wound Piriel had opened. The monster bellowed in pain and rage. Its claw lashed out, catching my helmet and tearing it free, along with a layer of skin from my scalp. I felt the blood running down my face, hot against my coal-black skin. The warboss grinned at me, thinking me vulnerable. It did not understand the sons of Vulcan. It did not understand what fire forges us into. I drove forward, abandoning my chainsword, still embedded in the creature's flesh. I drew my combat knife, a simple weapon, but one I had forged myself in the volcanic fires of Nocturne. The blade glowed with heat, a modification of my own design. As the warboss reached for me with its good arm, I ducked inside its guard and drove my knife up through the underside of its jaw. The blade, superheated, passed through muscle and bone with little resistance. It continued upward into the creature's brain. The warboss's eyes widened in shock, then dulled as death took it. It toppled like a fallen tree, nearly crushing me beneath its massive bulk. The death of the warboss broke the orcs' momentum. Without a leader, they fragmented into smaller groups that were easier to isolate and destroy. By nightfall, the settlement was secure. I found Brother Piriel in the care of our apothecary. His wounds were severe but not fatal. He would fight again. He looked up at me, his face pale from blood loss, but his eyes clear and proud. "Did we save them?" he asked. "Yes, brother," I told him. "The settlement stands. The people live." He smiled then, a rare expression on the face of a space Marine. Then it was worth it. We spent 3 weeks on Valos 9, hunting down the remaining orc forces and securing the settlements. We lost no brothers in that campaign. We saved nearly 3 million Imperial citizens. By any measure, it was a victory. Clean. Complete. The kind of success that the Imperium's propaganda mills transform into epic sagas to inspire the masses. And yet, even there, the grim reality of our existence intruded. On our final day, as we prepared to depart, a young boy approached me as I stood watch at the edge of the primary settlement. He could not have been more than 10 Terran years old. His eyes were wide as he took in my massive form, my battle-scarred armor, my inhuman features. "Are you an angel?" he asked me, his voice hushed with awe. I looked down at him and saw myself as I once was. A human child, fragile, vulnerable, looking up at something beyond comprehension. "No," I told him. "I am just a soldier." He shook his head, unconvinced. "My father says you're the Emperor's angels of death. He says you saved us all." "We did our duty," I replied, "nothing more." The boy studied me for a long moment. "Does it hurt?" he finally asked. "Does what hurt?" He gestured vaguely at all of me. "Being what you are." I could have lied to him, perhaps I should have, but something in his eyes demanded truth. "Yes," I said. "It hurts every day." He nodded solemnly, as if I had confirmed something he had already suspected. "Thank you," he said. Then he turned and ran back to the settlement, to his family, to his life that would continue because we had done what was necessary. I have often wondered what became of that boy, whether he grew to adulthood in peace, whether the Imperium's endless hunger for soldiers eventually claimed him as it claims all useful things, whether he remembered the truth I told him: it hurts every day. This is the glory they speak of in whispered tones. This is the honor of being one of the Emperor's chosen. This is the price we pay willingly, gladly, for we know no other purpose. But the galaxy is not kind enough to offer many victories as clean as Valos 9. Most often, glory looks like Kepharos 3, a hive world in the segmentum tempestus. Billions of souls stacked atop one another in mighty spires that pierced the perpetually smog-choked skies. A world that manufactured chemical weapons for the Imperial Guard, its factories belching toxic waste that turned the rain acidic and the ground barren for 1,000 kilometers in every direction. We came to Kepharos 3 in response to a planetary uprising. The official reports claimed worker revolts had turned violent, threatening the world's vital production of chemical munitions. The truth, as we discovered, was more complex. The planetary governor and his administration had been systematically working the lower hive populations to death. Safety protocols in the chemical plants had been abandoned to increase production. Workers were exposed to lethal compounds without protection. Entire habitation blocks were being sealed off when contamination reached critical levels, their populations left to die in agony rather than receive expensive medical treatment. The revolt began when a group of mid-hive physicians broke imperial law by treating the afflicted workers. When the governor's forces came to arrest them, the people rose up to protect their saviors. It was not rebellion against the Imperium that drove them, but the simple, human desire to live. Not that such distinctions mattered to the bureaucrats who dispatched us. Rebellion is rebellion. Production cannot be allowed to falter. The Emperor's wars must be fed. We made planetfall at the governor's palace, a grotesque monument to excess that sat atop the highest hive spire, above the smog, under clear skies that the lower classes never saw. Governor Malthus greeted us himself, a corpulent man dripping with gold adornments, his skin smooth and pale, untouched by the chemical burns that marked his workers. "Thank the Emperor you've arrived," he wheezed, struggling to bow before Captain Dracus. "The rebels control the lower 60 levels of hives, Secundus and Tertius. They've seized the primary munitorium. Production has fallen 30% in just 2 weeks. The situation is untenable." Dracus regarded the man with the impassive crimson gaze of our kind. "We will restore order," he said simply. The governor smiled, revealing augmetic teeth of gold and platinum. "Excellent. I have prepared tactical layouts of the rebel-held territories. Might I suggest you begin with saturation bombardment of the worker habitation blocks? Break their will early, and the rest will fall quickly." I watched Dracus's face. After 2 centuries of brotherhood, I could read the subtle signs of his disgust that would be invisible to human eyes. "We will assess the situation ourselves," Dracus replied. "The Salamanders do not make war on civilians if it can be avoided." The governor's smile faltered. "These are not civilians, Captain. They are traitors. Rebels. They have violated imperial law and disrupted vital war production." "Nevertheless," Dracus said, his tone making it clear the discussion was over, "we will proceed according to our own tactical assessments." That night, while the governor hosted a feast in our honor that none of us attended, we sent infiltration teams into the lower hives. I led one such team, moving through maintenance tunnels and waste disposal chutes to bypass the rebel barricades. We wore stripped-down armor, carrying minimal weaponry to remain mobile in the cramped confines of the underhive. What we found confirmed our suspicions. The rebels were ordinary imperial citizens, driven to desperation by unconscionable abuse. Many bore the marks of chemical exposure, weeping sores, respiratory distress. Children born with mutations that had nothing to do with chaos and everything to do with industrial toxins. Their leaders were not radicals or malcontents. They were shift supervisors, Medicaid personnel, maintenance technicians, people who had simply decided that survival was worth fighting for. I observed a makeshift hospital established in what had once been a reclamation plant. Hundreds of patients lay on improvised beds, attended by exhausted medical staff working with scavenged equipment. Among them moved a woman who seemed to be coordinating the efforts. She was small, even by human standards. her body thin and angular. Chemical burns covered the left side of her face, twisting her features into a permanent grimace. Yet there was a quiet dignity in how she moved from patient to patient, offering what comfort she could. I watched her for an hour from the shadows. I saw her hold the hand of a dying man as he drew his last breath. I saw her comfort a child whose lungs had been so damaged by chemical exposure that each breath was an agony. I saw her organize the distribution of the pitiful supplies they had managed to hoard. I returned to our command post with my report. Captain Dracus listened in silence as I detailed what I had seen. "What would you recommend, Brother Tarek?" he asked when I had finished. It was a test. I knew it then, just as I know it now. A test of whether I truly understood what it meant to be a salamander. "We should negotiate," I said. "These people do not seek to overthrow the Imperium. They seek only to survive. If the governor would implement proper safety protocols, provide adequate medical care, and grant amnesty to those who have risen up, I believe they would return to work willingly." Dracus nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "And if the governor refuses? Then we should remove him," I said, the words tantamount to heresy. "For the good of the Imperium, a dead world produces no munitions. A workforce worked to death leaves no one to train the next generation. What is happening on Kepharos 3 is not just immoral, it is inefficient." Dracus laughed then, a sound so rare among our kind that several battle brothers turned to stare. "Well reasoned, Brother Tarek. You speak as Vulcan would. The greatest good for the greatest number, while never forgetting the value of each individual life." His expression grew serious again. "Unfortunately, we lack the authority to remove a planetary governor, no matter how deserving. But perhaps there is another way." The next morning, Captain Dracus presented Governor Malthus with a proposal. The Salamanders would end the rebellion, but on our terms. We would guarantee worker safety reforms, medical treatment for the injured, and amnesty for all but the highest rebel leaders. In exchange, the workers would return to their posts, and production would resume. The governor was apoplectic. "You overstep your authority, Captain. You were sent here to crush this rebellion, not to negotiate with traitors." "We were sent here to restore order and resume production," Dracus replied calmly. "This is the most efficient way to achieve both objectives." "I will report this to your chapter master," the governor sputtered. "To the sector lord, to the Inquisition itself." "You are welcome to do so," Dracus said. "In the meantime, we will proceed with our plan, unless, of course, you wish to reclaim the lower hives yourself." The governor had no response to that. His own forces had proven woefully inadequate against the determined resistance of people with nothing left to lose. Without the Salamanders, he had no way to regain control. "Very well," he finally spat. "Do it your way, but I will remember this, Captain. The Adeptus Astartes are not beyond the reach of imperial justice." Dracus bowed slightly, the gesture containing not an ounce of respect. "We count on it, Governor." We made contact with the rebel leaders that same day. I was part of the delegation that entered their territory under a flag of truce. We came in full armor but with our weapons holstered, a show of both strength and restraint. They received us in the same makeshift hospital I had observed earlier. The woman with the chemical burns stood at the front of their group, her chin held high despite the fear that must have filled her at the sight of 5 space marines in full battle plate. "I am Captain Dracus of the Salamanders," my commander said, his deep voice echoing in the cavernous space. "We have come with a proposal to end this conflict." The woman stepped forward. "I am Vasha Kain, elected speaker for the Coalition of Worker Safety. We did not seek conflict, Captain. We sought only to live." "So I have been told," Dracus replied. "And that is why we are here. Not to destroy you, but to find a path forward." He outlined our proposal. Safety reforms, medical treatment, amnesty, a return to work under humane conditions. The rebel leaders listened in stunned silence. They had expected death. They had steeled themselves for martyrdom. They had not expected compassion from the Emperor's angels of death. Why? Vasha finally asked. "Why would you help us? We are nothing to the Imperium." "You are everything to the Imperium," Dracus corrected her. "You are its lifeblood, its foundation. Without loyal citizens willing to toil and sacrifice, the Imperium is nothing but empty cathedrals and meaningless rituals. And if Governor Malthus reneges on these terms once you have departed?" another leader asked. "He will not," I said, speaking for the first time, "because we will not depart. Not all of us. I will remain on Kepharos III with a small detachment. We will ensure the terms are met." It was not a decision I had discussed with Captain Dracus beforehand. It was presumptuous of me to offer, and yet, when I glanced at my commander, I saw approval in his eyes. "Brother Sergeant Tarek speaks with my authority," he confirmed. "The Salamanders do not abandon those under their protection." Vasha studied us, her one good eye narrowed in suspicion. "And what do you want in return?" "Beyond our return to work? Nothing," Dracus said simply. She laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "Forgive me, Captain, but no one in the Imperium does anything for nothing, especially not for people like us. We are Salamanders," I told her. "We were human once. Some of us remember what that means." A week later, the workers returned to their posts. Production resumed at 70% capacity within days, rising to 90% within a month as the injured recovered and returned to work. The reforms were implemented slowly, grudgingly, but they were implemented. I remained on Kepharos III for 3 years with a rotating detachment of battle brothers. We established a permanent garrison in Hive Secundus. Our presence alone was enough to ensure the governor kept his word. It is remarkable how even the most corrupt officials find their moral compass when a space marine is watching. Vasha Kane became a liaison between the workers and the planetary administration. Her burns never healed, but her spirit never broke. She visited our garrison once a month to provide updates on conditions in the hives. Over time, a cautious respect developed between us. During my final month on Kepharos III, before I was to rejoin my company for deployment to another war zone, she brought me a gift. It was a simple thing, a worker's medallion cast in bronze, the kind given to those who survive 30 years in the chemical plants. "This was my father's," she told me, placing it in my massive hand where it looked like a child's toy. "He died of lung rot 2 days before the rebellion began. His death was the spark that lit the flame." "I cannot accept this," I said, trying to return it. "It is your legacy." She closed my fingers around the medallion. "And now it is part of yours. So you remember why you fight, not for glory, not for the Imperium, but for people like my father, who live and die in darkness so that others might see the light." I kept the medallion. I wear it still, on a chain around my neck, beneath my armor where only I know it exists. A reminder that glory is not what the Imperium says it is. Glory is in the lives we save, not the lives we take. But for every Kepharos III, there are a dozen worlds where we cannot find such clean resolutions. Where the corruption runs too deep, the threat is too great, or time simply runs out. I think of Delanos II, where a warp storm breached the veil between realities and flooded an entire continent with the raw stuff of chaos. We fought for 6 weeks to evacuate as many civilians as possible before the corruption became irreversible. In the end, we saved less than 3% of the population. We were forced to burn the rest with holy promethium, their screams following us as we lifted off in the final gunships. Not because they were heretics who deserved death, but because what they would become would threaten countless other worlds. I think of the death of Captain Dracus on the forge moon of Helios Secundus. He fell defending a cohort of Skitarii who had been cut off from their main forces by a Necron advance. The machine men he died protecting barely acknowledged his sacrifice, seeing it as merely the optimal tactical decision rather than the act of heroism it was. His body was recovered, his gene seed harvested, but the records of the Adeptus Mechanicus make no mention of the Space Marine captain who gave his life for their troops. I think of the schism on Avaran 5, where rival imperial cults came into conflict over interpretations of the imperial creed. Both sides claimed to be the true servants of the emperor. Both sides were willing to kill and die for their beliefs. We were sent not to judge the theological dispute, but simply to end the violence that threatened the planet's production of adamantium. I led that mission myself, having been promoted to sergeant after the death of Captain Dracus. It was my first command, and I was determined to honor his memory by finding a solution that minimized the loss of life. I spent weeks in negotiations, trying to find common ground between the warring factions. In the end, I failed. The hatred ran too deep, the conviction was too strong. When the fighting resumed, despite my best efforts, we were ordered to support the faction favored by the ecclesiarchy, regardless of the merits of their theological position. We killed thousands of men and women whose only crime was a slightly different interpretation of how best to worship the same emperor. I remember the face of High Deacon Solus, the leader of the faction we were ordered to suppress. As I led him to his execution, he looked at me not with hatred, but with pity. "You know this is wrong," he said quietly, too quietly for anyone but a space marine to hear. "You know in your heart that we are faithful servants of the Emperor." "It does not matter what I know," I replied. "Only what I must do." "And that, my son," he said, "is why the Imperium will one day fall, not from external enemies, but from within. When good men obey bad orders without question, evil triumphs. I executed him myself, a clean death, as painless as I could make it. I told myself it was a mercy. I told myself I was just following orders. I told myself many things in the dark nights that followed. None of them brought comfort. This is the glory they speak of in hushed tones. This is the honor of the Space Marine. This is the burden we bear in silence. Yet still we endure. Still we fight. Still, we try to remember the human hearts that beat beneath our transhuman physiology. This, more than anything, is what separates the sons of Vulcan from our brother Astartes in other chapters. We refuse to forget our humanity, no matter the cost. It is a cost paid in pain, in doubt, in nights spent staring into the darkness, questioning choices made and lives taken. Other chapters do not suffer so. The Ultramarines have their codex to guide them, their certainty in procedure and protocol. The Space Wolves have their resigned sagas, their celebration of glory in battle. The Imperial Fists have their stoicism, their emotional detachment from the horrors they witness and inflict. But we Salamanders carry each death, each failure, each compromise as a burning coal in our hearts. And like the forges of Nocturne, those burning coals both wound us and strengthen us. I have served as sergeant for nearly 4 decades now. In that time, I have led my battle brothers through campaigns that would break the spirit of lesser warriors. I have made decisions that haunt me still. I have watched good men die following my orders. I have ordered the deaths of millions when no other option remained. And yet, I have also witnessed moments of such profound humanity that they sustain me through the darkness. On Tartarus Prime, amid a brutal campaign against Chaos cultists, I found a child hiding in the ruins of what had once been a schola. A girl of no more than 6, clutching a singed stuffed animal, covered in ash and blood not her own. She should have been terrified of me, this massive, inhuman figure in scorched battle plate. Instead, she reached up to me with absolute trust, as if she had always known I would come for her. I carried her for 3 days through active war zones, her tiny form cradled in arms designed to crush and kill. My battle brothers modified their tactics without question, taking greater risks to protect this single, insignificant life. By any cold calculus of war, we should have abandoned her. One child against the strategic objectives of the campaign, one life against the billions that would be lost if we failed. But we are Salamanders. We do not make such calculations. We delivered her to a refugee transport bound for a safer system. I never learned her name. She never spoke a word during those 3 days. But as I handed her over to the care of the refugee coordinator, she pressed her stuffed animal into my hands. A final gift. a gesture of trust and gratitude that no tactical victory could ever match. I keep it still, that scorched toy, alongside the worker's medallion from Kepharos III, small reminders of why we fight, of what victory truly means. There was Veritas IV, a feudal world where technological regression had left the population vulnerable to a particularly virulent plague. We came not as warriors, but as saviors, escorting Medicae ships and supplies. My squad spent months traveling from settlement to settlement, establishing field hospitals, distributing treatments, burning the dead with reverence rather than contempt. The locals called us the Black Angels. They built shrines to us in their primitive settlements. They sang hymns about our mercy. It made my battle brothers uncomfortable, this worship. It is not glory we seek. But it was the first campaign in decades where we did not have to take a single human life, where every action served only to protect, to preserve, to save. When we departed Veritas IV, the planetary governor presented each of us with a pendant carved from native wood, a stylized flame that represented both our chapter and the new hope we had brought to a dying world. Such trinkets would be meaningless to most Astartes, but we Salamanders value these connections to those we protect. These tangible reminders that our endless war has purpose beyond mere survival. But for every Veritas IV, there is a Caelus Tertius, a world so thoroughly corrupted that no salvation is possible, only purification. Caelus Tertius was an industrial world devoted to the manufacture of sentinel walkers and other light vehicles for the Imperial Guard. Its pollution-choked atmosphere and vast factory complexes made it indistinguishable from 1,000 other such worlds scattered throughout the Imperium. What made Caelus Tertius unique was the nature of the corruption that took root there, not the familiar taint of chaos with its obvious mutations and blasphemies, not the infiltration of gene stealers with their telltale signs. For those who know how to look, something subtler, something older. The first indication that something was wrong came when sentinel shipments to frontline guard regiments began arriving empty. Crates that should have contained war machines instead contained nothing but ash and scorched metal. Investigations revealed that the machines had somehow self-immolated during transit, burning so hot that they were reduced to cinders despite the vacuum of space. When contact with Caelus Tertius itself became sporadic, then ceased entirely, we were dispatched to investigate and, if necessary, restore Imperial control. We made planetfall expecting to find rebellion or perhaps Xenos infiltration. What we found defied easy categorization. The factories still ran, the workers still attended their shifts, the machines were still built. But each night, the newly constructed sentinels and tanks would walk themselves to vast pits dug into the planetary crust, where they would climb in and allow themselves to be consumed by magma. The workers, when we attempted to question them, spoke in monotones about feeding the hunger below. Their eyes were vacant. Their movements, mechanical. They showed no fear of us, no emotion at all. They simply continued their tasks with machine-like precision. Deep scans of the planet's core revealed anomalous readings. Something dwelled beneath the crust of Caelus Tertius, something ancient, something vast, something hungry. The Mechanicus should study this, Brother Hector argued when we gathered to determine our course of action. This could be a previously unknown Xenos species, a significant scientific discovery. The Inquisition should be notified, countered Brother Malthus. This has the hallmarks of a warp entity, perhaps even a buried titan. I listened to their debate in silence, watching the factory complex through the armor-glass viewport of our forward base. Watching the mindless workers continuing their pointless labor. Watching the newly made war machines marching to their doom in perfect orderly lines. "We burn it," I finally said, silencing the discussion. "We burn it all." They looked at me in surprise. Of all our brotherhood, I was known as the most likely to seek alternatives to destruction, to look for the path that preserved life, even at additional risk to ourselves. It was a reputation I had earned over centuries of service, through countless campaigns where I had argued against the expedient solution in favor of the human one. "Explain your reasoning, Brother Sergeant," Hector said, his tone respectful despite his obvious disagreement. I pointed to the factories, to the workers moving like automatons through their daily routines. "They are already dead," I said quietly. "Whatever dwells below has consumed their minds, if not their bodies. And it is growing stronger with each machine it devours." "All the more reason to study it," Hector persisted. "If it can control both humans and machines, it represents a significant threat, one we must understand to counter." "And how many more will it take while we study it?" I asked. "How many ships will arrive to investigate, only to fall under its control? How many Mechanicus adepts will be corrupted in their quest for knowledge?" I shook my head. "No, some things are not meant to be understood, only destroyed." In the end, they deferred to my judgment, as was their duty. We returned to our strike cruiser and initiated a systematic bombardment of the planet's surface, targeting the factory complexes first, then the magma pits, and finally any remaining population centers. As the bombardment continued, our ship's augers detected movement beneath the planet's crust. Something vast was stirring, something ancient was waking. "Continue the bombardment," I ordered. "Focus all remaining firepower on these coordinates." The final salvo struck the location where our scans had detected the strongest anomalies. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the planet's crust began to fracture. Magma burst through in vast plumes visible from orbit. A psychic scream tore through the minds of every soul aboard our vessel, so powerful that even the non-psychers among us heard it as a distant wail of anger and pain. Then, silence. We monitored Caelus Tertius for 3 weeks. The geological activity eventually subsided. The psychic emanations ceased. Whatever had dwelled within the planet was either dormant again or, more likely, destroyed. The official report listed the action as exterminatus extremis, executed due to irrecoverable industrial collapse and widespread civil unrest. The truth was recorded only in the sealed archives of our chapter, and in the nightmares of those who heard that final psychic scream. This is the glory they speak of, though they know not what it means. This is the honor of making decisions that none should have to make, of bearing burdens that would crush a normal human soul. I have served the Emperor for 276 years. I have seen wonders and horrors beyond counting. I have made decisions that saved millions and condemned millions more. I have watched brothers die and recruits rise to take their place. I have forged weapons in the volcanic fires of Nocturne and reforged myself countless times in the crucible of war. And through it all, I have tried to remember what sets the Salamanders apart. What makes us unique among the Emperor's angels. We remember, we feel, we carry the weight of each life taken, and each life saved. We do not glory in battle for its own sake, but in the protection of humanity, no matter the cost to ourselves. There is an old legend on Nocturne, a tale told to children as they learn the art of the forge. It speaks of a salamander, one of the great fire lizards that dwell in the volcanic regions, that willingly entered the forge fire to save a human child who had fallen in. The salamander wrapped itself around the child, absorbing the heat of the flames into its fireproof scales. Though the child was saved, the salamander was changed by its time in the fire. Its scales, once bright and vibrant, were charred black. Its eyes, once dark, glowed red with the heat it had absorbed. The changed salamander could never return to its kind. It had become something other, something between worlds, neither fully beast nor anything else recognized in nature. But it had saved the child, and in doing so, found a purpose beyond mere survival. We are like that salamander, changed by the fires we willingly enter, alienated from the humanity we were born to, neither fully human nor truly inhuman, bearing the marks of our sacrifice in our charcoal skin and glowing red eyes, unable to return to what we once were. But we save the children, we protect the innocent, we stand against the darkness that would consume everything, and in that purpose, we find meaning in the transformation we have undergone. Is this glory? I do not know. I know only duty and brotherhood and the fire that forges us all. There is a sculpture in the great hall of our fortress monastery on Nocturne. It depicts Vulcan, our Primarch, not in battle, but kneeling to lift a fallen child from the ashes of war. His massive form, wrought in adamantium and onyx, curls protectively around the small bronze figure of the human infant. His face, so like and unlike our own, bears an expression of profound compassion. When new recruits enter our chapter, before their transformation begins, they are brought to stand before this sculpture. They are told the story of Vulcan's compassion, of his unwavering commitment to the protection of humanity. They are asked a single question: are you willing to burn so that others might live? Only those who understand the true meaning of the question are accepted. Only those who grasp that the glory of the Salamanders lies not in victory, but in sacrifice, are worthy to join our ranks. I stood before that sculpture over 2 centuries ago, a frightened boy from the ash wastes of Nocturne, and answered yes, without fully understanding what I was agreeing to. I understand now. I understand the glory and the burden of being a son of Vulcan. The fire consumes us all in the end. But what we protect from the flames, that is our true legacy. That is the glory that matters. Not the tales told in imperial propagation halls, not the honors bestowed by distant lords who have never seen true combat, but the lives that continue because we were willing to place ourselves between humanity and all that would harm it. I am Sergeant Tarek of the Salamanders, and I have died 1,000 deaths in service to the Emperor. Each brother lost, each civilian I could not save, each world left burning in our wake. Small deaths, necessary deaths. But I have also lived 1,000 lives, each child rescued from the rubble of war, each world protected from the darkness, each moment of compassion in a galaxy that knows only cruelty. That is the paradox of our existence, that is the truth behind the glory they speak of. We die every day so that humanity might live. We burn so that others might know warmth without destruction. We enter the fire willingly, knowing it will change us, scar us, mark us forever as something other than human. And we would choose it again, every time. For we are the Salamanders, sons of Vulcan, forged in fire, tempered in battle, shaped by compassion. And though the galaxy burns around us, though the enemies of humanity are beyond counting, though the cost of victory grows ever steeper, we will stand into the fires of battle, unto the anvil of war, for the Emperor, for humanity, for the chance that somewhere a child might grow to adulthood never knowing the horrors we have witnessed. That somewhere our sacrifice makes possible a life of peace rather than endless war. That, brother, is glory.